My name is Mara Hale. If you ask the town who I am, they'll tell you I'm the daughter who stayed in the little blue house on Juniper Street, stayed with the cracked porch and the stubborn lilac bush, stayed with the bills when they came like storms. My father, Richard Hale, had a way of entering rooms like a celebration and leaving them like a rumour. He sold antiques and promises. Only one of those held value. The day he died, the sky turned a flat, spent grey. No drama, no trumpet of heavens, just a cloud that decided to sit on our faces and make everything heavier. The church smelled like lilies and lemon polish and the kind of perfume that clings to hugs mixed with grief. I stood in the second row beside Lorraine, his second wife, who dabbed her eyes with a tissue she never actually used. Her mascara didn't dare move. Lorraine wore mourning the way she wore pearls, as if it were proof of something. And then I saw them, front row, centre. A young woman with a dark braid down her back, and a young man with a careful jaw and a too-polished watch. Both of them had my father's eyes, not the colour, but the look, the little glint that says, I know something you don't. That's when I thought it. The truth sat in the front row. People whispered like they were moving the air around secrets. I listened to the soft hiss and hum of it while our pastor spoke about mercy and second chances and how every story bends toward light. I wanted to believe him, but I had learned that some people use light like a stage. When the service ended, Lorraine squeezed my hand too long and too hard, her nails pressing crescents into my skin. Be gracious, she said without turning to me. This is a delicate day. Delicate, I echoed, because the word for what it truly was, strategic, wouldn't look nice in the condolence book. We moved to the fellowship hall where the ham sandwiches looked like apologies, and people told me my father had a wonderful laugh. He did. He also had affairs like weather, some sunny, some storms. He had debts tucked into desk drawers, owed favours folded into jacket pockets. Once, when I was 16, I found a velvet ring box in his glove compartment, beside a receipt for a motel under a name that wasn't his. I tucked it back the way you put a dangerous animal back into its cage, and pretend you never saw it. Now, in the fellowship hall, a small hush opened as the front row woman approached. She stood with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged. She had my father's cheekbones, and I hated that my heart recognized her before my head did. "Hi," she said. "You must be Mara." Her voice was low, steady. "I'm Sierra." The man beside her added, "Logan?" He didn't offer a hand. He looked at the room like he was assessing a property. He hesitated, just long enough for it to be noticed. "Family." Lorraine appeared at my shoulder like a perfume, sudden, all at once, too strong. "Yes," she cooed. "Richard wanted them here. Such a surprise for everyone. Isn't life full of surprises?" I looked at Sierra. She held my gaze like it weighed something. "He found me last year," she said. "Said he'd been looking. We had coffee a few times, talked about old records and the way old houses make you feel like time is something you can touch." That sounded like him. It also sounded like a script he would give to any daughter he wanted to pull inside his orbit. I nodded. "I'm glad you came." Lorraine clapped her hands softly, the way you clap for a toddler who's shown you a leaf. "There will be a small gathering at the house," she announced to no one and everyone. "Family only, for the will." The word will fell into the room like a stone into a pond. Circles of interest widened. Lorraine's eyes flicked to me. She smiled with the tips of her lips and none of her teeth. I ate one half of a sandwich and tasted nothing. Grief is a quiet thief. Suspicion is louder. I could hear it in the scrape of chair legs, the way folks avoided my eyes, the fast flutter of Lorraine's pulse at her neck. Weeks before my father died, a letter arrived at the Blue House. Not from him. He never wrote letters, but from his attorney, Mr. Peabody, whose office smelled like old books and peppermint tea. "Your father asked that I contact you," the letter said. "There are instructions of a sensitive legal nature. If you receive this, it means he was not well enough to deliver them himself." I went to see Mr. Peabody that same day. He looked at me like a man who'd just been asked to carry a piano up 3 flights of stairs. "Your father asked for something unusual," he had said, taking off his glasses and folding the legs like it might give him time. "He wanted all heirs to his estate to submit to DNA verification before any assets are distributed. He prepaid for mobile lab services and requested the collection be done at the funeral." I laughed then, sharp, accidental. At the funeral? He was specific. He said truth is truest when people are watching. I remember staring at the patterned rug and thinking of the word truest, how it didn't feel like a real word until you needed it to be. I asked Mr. Peabody why my father would do that now, after a lifetime of blurred lines and soft lies. Mr. Peabody opened a drawer and took out a sealed envelope with my name on it, the seal unbroken, my father's handwriting on the front, like a stranger trying to look like someone I knew. "He made me promise to deliver this to you," he said, "on the day of his funeral, after the DNA collection." I held the envelope like it was a bird with a heartbeat I could crush. "I'm supposed to bring the lab," I said, finding myself the only person in the story who could make truth show up at the right time. Now, at the fellowship hall, I excused myself to step outside. The air had a damp bite. The mobile lab van sat at the curb, white and unassuming, with blue letters on the side that could have been for dental work or disaster response. A woman in a navy polo stepped out when she saw me. "Mara Hale?" she asked. "I'm Alicia. We're ready when you are." "Thank you." I thought I might throw up. Then I imagined my father, grinning at his own audacity, and nausea turned into something sharper. Not anger, not yet. Something like commitment. Back inside, I found Lorraine gathered with Sierra and Logan near the coffee urn, casting ownership over styrofoam cups like tiny kingdoms. "We'll head to the house," she told me. "Mr. Peabody will meet us." "Before we do," I said, keeping my voice level, "there's a requirement in Dad's estate plan. DNA verification for all heirs. The mobile lab is outside." Lorraine blinked twice, slow, as if I had spoken in a language she preferred not to understand. "At the funeral?" Her voice went flat on the last word. "Unseemly." "It was his instruction," I said. "He prepaid." Something flickered across Logan's face, annoyance, maybe calculation. He spread his hands. "Of course," he said too quickly. "We have nothing to hide." Sierra glanced at him, then nodded once. "If this is what your father wanted, we'll do it." Lorraine smiled a small, taut smile. "And if some of us decline?" "Then some of us don't get invited to the reading," I said. There was a soft sound behind me, like fabric exhaling. When I turned, 3 women from my father's old bowling league pretended to stir sugar into empty coffee. The room watched with its ears. We filed out to the van like a strange parade. Alicia greeted each of us with efficient kindness, swabs, labels, chain of custody forms with carbon copies that made everything feel permanent. She explained the process in the voice people use when they've learned to make complicated things sound small. Logan went first. He sat with his jaw set, that careful watch catching the fluorescent lights. The swab went into the tube with a soft click. Sierra went next, pulling her braid over her shoulder to keep it out of the way, eyes far away like she was looking at a younger version of herself through a window. Lorraine hovered by the door until Alicia asked, "And you, ma'am?" Lorraine's mouth went tight. "I'm not seeking inheritance," she said lightly. "Only what is right. Alicia looked at me. I swallowed, nodded. I sat in the chair. The swab tasted like hospital air. Alicia labelled my tube and set it beside Sierra's and Logan's, like 3 small bullets. "Results?" Logan asked, casual, in the way that isn't. "Preliminaries in a few hours," Alicia said. "Formal report to the attorney in 72. "A few hours?" Lorraine's voice cracked on hours. "And we do what? Have tea in the parking lot?" "We go to the house," I said. "We eat pie. We remember him. And then we read what he left us to read." The blue house looked too clean when we arrived, like a set dressed by someone who didn't know where our life actually piled up. Lorraine had hired a cleaning crew and told them to make it look nice. They made it look like we lived somewhere else. The lilac bush out front had put its elbows out into the walk. Maybe it was tired of making room for strangers. Inside, the air was butter and sugar and the flake of crust. My neighbour, Mrs. Klein, had baked 3 pies and left them on the counter with a note that said, "Eat before you fight. Wise." I cut slices big enough to do their job. We ate in the living room where the old clock ticked like an honest heart. Mr. Peabody arrived with a leather folio and eyes that looked more tired than old. We all stood in that polite, awkward way and then sat like we were in assigned seats in a class we'd failed before. He cleared his throat, but I saw his gaze flick to the window, as if he were waiting for someone he'd already sent for. "The estate of Richard Hale," he began, "is to be distributed according to the following instructions, contingent on DNA verification of heirs." He glanced at Sierra and Logan. "Your samples are in process. We will proceed with the logistical reading, and certain bequests will be confirmed upon receipt of the lab report." Lorraine folded her hands like she was about to pray or pounce. "Get on with it," she breathed through a smile. "Personal effects to be distributed at Mara's discretion, with sentimental priority over monetary value." Mr. Peabody read it gently, the way you read a poem when the poet is not famous but the feeling is. "To my daughter Mara, who told me the truth when I wanted a lie, I leave." "Excuse me," Logan cut in. "Daughter?" He flicked a glance at Sierra that asked a question he didn't want answered. "We should wait for the report." "You can," I said, "but the words are still the words." Mr. Peabody kept going. "I leave the Hale family home at 212 Juniper Street, free of encumbrance, with the condition that the lilac bush out front never be cut down. To Sierra, if verified as my child, I leave the contents of my record collection and an annual stipend from the sale of my inventory to be managed by a trustee until she no longer wants to pretend to like jazz." Sierra huffed a small laugh, startled, almost a sob. "He remembered that," she murmured. "I told him once that jazz made me feel like I was in the wrong room." Lorraine lifted her chin. "And to Logan?" she asked, sweetness sharpening like a knife. Mr. Peabody touched the next page, hesitated. "There is no bequest to Logan," he said simply. The room shifted, even the clock stuttered. Logan's face cooled a degree. "That's a mistake." "It's what it says," Mr. Peabody replied. "We will verify all matters after DNA confirmation." Lorraine stood, paced, turned toward me. "This is humiliating," she hissed softly, like she believed humiliation was a flavour I had chosen out of spite. "Your father meant for his new family to be taken care of." "Then he should have written it," I said. "He was very good at writing checks when he wanted to. He was less good at writing the truth." Something in Lorraine's face cracked then, not the paint, but the plan. She opened her bag and pulled out a slim blue folder, hands tight. "He told me," she said, almost to herself, "he told me that if Logan helped him with certain arrangements, there would be a share." "Logan helped with arrangements?" My words were steady, even while my heart repelled down a cliff. "What arrangements?" Lorraine pressed her lips together. Silence poured into the room like cold water. Before anyone could pretend our truths were just misplaced, there was a knock at the door. Alicia stepped in, professional calm like a lighthouse. "Preliminary results," she said, holding an envelope like a very small bomb. "You'll still get the formal report, but this is the quick read." Mr. Peabody accepted it with the gravitas of a man opening weather. He slit it with a letter opener shaped like a dolphin my father had picked up at a yard sale and declared art. The old clock ticked. Somewhere a car door thudded in the street like punctuation. He read. His eyes moved left to right, back to the top, down again. When he looked up, he didn't look at me or Lorraine. He looked at Sierra. "Sierra," he said gently, "the preliminary indicates a 99.4% probability that Richard Hale was your biological father." Sierra's hand flew to her mouth. Tears gathered quick, then slowed like she'd been carrying them for a year, and they had finally found the floor. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." "And Logan," Mr. Peabody continued, "the preliminary indicates a probability inconsistent with biological paternity." "Inconsistent?" Logan barked a laugh that wasn't a laugh. "Do you do stand-up, or do you just practice vague language for fun?" "It means," Mr. Peabody said carefully, "that it is highly unlikely you are Mr. Hale's son." Silence did a new thing then. It shifted from cold to cruel. Lorraine stepped forward, then stopped, then opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes went everywhere at once, looking for a script she had misplaced. "Fine," Logan said, jaw tight. "So your paperwork is wrong, or your swabs got mixed, or—" "It's chain of custody," Alicia interrupted, patient and firm. It didn't. Logan's gaze slid to Lorraine. It wasn't a request for comfort. It was an invoice. The feeling that rose in me wasn't triumph. Not yet. It was something like gravity releasing its hold, a fraction, the way you feel lighter when you set down a heavy box you didn't realize you were still carrying. I looked at Sierra. Her tears were quiet. She wasn't looking for a camera. She was looking at a photograph on the mantel, the one of my father at 22, grinning on the roof of a car he didn't own. Mr. Peabody cleared his throat. He reached into his folio and pulled out the envelope he had kept for me. My name, in my father's hand. The seal broke with a sound like a soft sigh. "Mara," it began, "if you're reading this, I ran out of ways to make a mess and had to settle for telling you the truth. I asked you once to lie for me. You said no. You were the first person to love me without making me your favorite story. I remembered the day. He'd wanted me to tell a creditor I didn't know him. It would have bought him a month of freedom. It would have cost me a decade of respect for myself. I said no, and he laughed like a man who had just learned a word he didn't know could exist. Boundary. I've made mistakes shaped like people. I tried to fix some of them before the end. I found Sierra late. I didn't find others at all. If she sits in the front row, it's because I asked her to. Maybe I wanted you to see that some of my love had gone to waste in places I never owned. The house is yours. You kept the lights on when mine went out. Keep the lilac. It knows all our secrets and blooms anyway." The letter blurred and sharpened and blurred again. I set it down on my lap like a fragile truth and closed my eyes for 2 counts so the room could return to itself. Lorraine let out a breath that sounded like a confession she hadn't planned to make. "Richard told me to invite Logan," she said. Anger and embarrassment knotted together. "He told me to make sure he felt important, to help with some debts and some inventory, to fetch things, to call people. I thought—" She stopped herself just before the words turned into blame. "You thought you could turn that into a guarantee," I said softly. "My father had a lot of those. He loved guarantees the way other men love good whiskey." Logan's expression changed then, not to guilt, not to shame, something smaller, meaner. He looked around the room like a man measuring a loss he had already spent. "This is ridiculous," he spat. "We're talking about heirlooms and bushes like this is a fairy tale, and none of it matters. What matters is cash." "Cash," I repeated, tasting it, feeling the way the word dropped to the floor and stayed there, graceless. Mr. Peabody slid a document across the table to him. "What matters is law," he said. "You are welcome to contest. But you should know that any attempt to misrepresent paternity to secure inheritance is a felony." It was then, finally, that triumph visited me. Not the gloating kind, the human kind, the kind that feels like standing up straight for the first time in a long time and realizing your body remembers how. Sierra wiped her face and looked at me, really looked, like two people meeting in the wreckage of a house and deciding what bricks might still be used. "I don't want anything that isn't mine," she said, "but I would like to know you, if you'd let me." I thought of the empty chair at my kitchen table and how sometimes, at night, I say things out loud because there's no one to make them a conversation. I thought of the lilac bush and how it blooms loud every spring, like it refuses to be ignored. "I'd like that," I said. Outside, the sky had stopped pretending to be heavy. It simply was. Clouds do that. They get tired of posturing and turn honest. We stood on the porch while Mr. Peabody made calls and Alicia packed her kit and Lorraine scraped together her dignity and put it in a bag with her lipstick and left without hugging anyone. Sierra touched the lilac leaves with her fingertips, the way you touch the hand of a child when you're trying not to make a big deal out of everything. "He liked jazz," she said. "He liked to talk about liking jazz," I corrected, and we both laughed, sudden and genuine, the kind of laugh that can only happen after a room has been cleaned of lies. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the letter again. The house was brave silent, the way houses are when they've decided not to haunt you anymore. I made tea and didn't sweeten it and let the bitterness tell me I was still here. I ran my finger over the last lines, the ones I hadn't read aloud. "If you're angry, be angry at me. Not at the girl with my eyes or the boy with the watch. I never bought him. I was a man who tried to make an auction of his sins. Don't let anyone buy them cheap. Keep the house. Keep the lilac. Keep telling the truth even when you're the only one in the room who has to hear it. There's a strange peace in paperwork. Signatures make ghosts sit down. Over the next few weeks, the formal reports arrived, neat and definitive. Sierra and I went through boxes in the attic and found photographs of my father in borrowed suits, a baseball with a smudge that looked like hope, and a stack of letters from someone named Alma, who wrote like rain. We found a record that Sierra said she hated and then asked to borrow anyway. We argued about whether the blue walls should stay blue. We made a list of repairs and put porch swing at the very top. Logan sent a lawyer's letter and then stopped sending anything. Lorraine moved to her sister's for a while, and then, when I saw her at the grocery store months later, she looked at me with a mixture of envy and relief that told me she was no longer trying to make grief pay her rent. The day the deed arrived in my name, I stood on the porch and watched the wind comb the lilac leaves. Sierra was inside, kneeling on the floor, alphabetizing records and talking to me about a bakery she wanted to start that would sell cookies in the shape of states. "No one ever buys Nebraska," she said. "I want to make Nebraska popular." I laughed out loud. The sound startled a bird on the gutter. I turned the deed over in my hands and felt something open in my chest that wasn't victory and wasn't forgiveness, but had a little of both inside it. Here's what I learned. Truth is slow. It doesn't always arrive in time to be useful. Sometimes it comes late and still saves you. My father's last good act wasn't money or property. It was insisting that the story be told with science and signatures instead of wishes and intimidation. He made the truth sit in the front row, and he asked us to look directly at it. He made me bring the van. When people ask me now if I was angry, I tell them yes, and also grateful, which is a confusing way to feel. I was angry at the years I spent trying to keep a light on for a man who loved the dark. I was grateful that, in the end, he chose daylight. I was angry at Lorraine's performance of loss and grateful for Sierra's real one. I was angry at Logan's arrogance and grateful that the law speaks in a voice calm enough to tame even that. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on the porch swing. We finally hung, and I read my father's letter again, and I pretend the lilac can hear me when I say, "We're okay." The bush doesn't answer, but it blooms when it's supposed to, and that is its own kind of reply. Blood can be forged, but character can't. When you stand with the truth, quietly, stubbornly, the right people step closer and the wrong ones step away. If you're ever given a choice between a comfortable lie and an inconvenient truth, choose the truth. It might not get you applause, but one day it will hand you a house key and it will fit.